when I recruit, I specifically ask them not to, because even though I am a certified practitioner, I'm not really completely sure I am bias free. So if it's not necessary, don't put it on your resume because you don't know what people think of that type. I've had people ask me, what type should I date, which is just mind-boggling.
Certainly, we don't use the MBTI in any selection capacity. So we don't use it to recruit people to an organization for a particular role. We don't use it to select the kind of people who we might want to date.
嗨，大家好，我是 Sherry。大家都知道，我在谈 MBTI 的时候，常常会碰到很多重复的问题啊。那我今天就非常荣幸了，请到一个我们的 MBTI 总部的大咖来为大家解释 MBTI 很多常见的迷思。So today I am so honored to have Cameron Nott, Mr. Cameron Nott, on my show. Cameron, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Sherry. It's a pleasure to be here.
I am excited for you because right before our interview, I found out that you were just recently promoted.
Yeah, about that time, yes.
Okay, so to be the Chief International Markets Officer, can you explain a little bit what you did before? What was your job before? Yeah. And as the new Chief International Markets Officer, do you have any goals for this new phase?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So I've been with the Myers-Briggs company now for getting close to 16 years. And for a good part of that time, I've been the managing director of the Asia Pacific region. And my role has recently changed, where now I have a broader responsibility in terms of leading all of our international markets, including our global network of partners. So, in terms of the goals I have for that, it really is just about seeing the promotion of the international markets, international business across the Myers-Briggs company. And in addition to that role, I also am a psychologist and part of the training faculty. So I do get involved in the delivery of our full range of certification programs and consulting assignments, but including the Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Excellent. I really look forward to having more official presence in Taiwan because one of the reasons I invited you to my show is because over the years, I've heard a lot of myths about this instrument. I really like to debunk these myths, and I'm so happy that you could have your take on it because I try to explain it my way, and I don't know if it took. I think some people began to understand it, but others may not. So these are the 5 common myths that I see a lot. So one is MBTI is a new personality test that has become very trendy in recent years.
So no, not in terms of it being new. No, it's been around for more than 80 years. It has just, decades of research behind it. And it has been probably the most popular personality assessment of its kind for indeed decades. Now, it has become increasingly popular. It has had a spike of interest really since the pandemic. Yes, that there was, a number of K-pop bands and other influences that, during that pandemic when we're all locked down, we didn't have that social contact. It was just a nice way for people to start to learn more about themselves and learn about each other. Because at the end of the day, people need people. So I think it surged in popularity at that time. Certainly, there's been a wave of popularity across Asia, but it has been used, again, across Asia and indeed around the world for decades.
Right. And I think people forget companies use Myers-Briggs, right? It seems like most people in Asia, or at least a lot of people that I know, thinks MBTI as sort of a personal development, or it's a fun, entertaining test or quiz.
Yeah.
So it has actually been used in large corporations over the past few decades.
Decades, yeah.
Decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were totally right about MBTI is ubiquitous now. A very common conversation starter is, are you an E person or are you an I person? So I'm glad you set that straight. Now, the second question is 16personalities.com is the official MBTI website, and that every personality type has a name, such as commander, mediator, or protagonist, for example.
That's not true. In terms of the official Myers-Briggs type indicator, so that can be accessed through qualified practitioners such as yourself, The confusion comes about because there are different, so the Myers-Briggs type indicator, it's really been designed to measure and bring to life a theory that was developed by a Swiss psychiatrist, Carl Jung, and it was then, again, developed by the Myers-Briggs family. There are other assessments, some more rigorously developed than others, that also will measure Carl Jung's type theory. So there are a number of assessments out there that look very similar to the MBTI, but there is only one official MBTI. And what they're all doing is trying to measure Carl Jung's theory, but the Myers-Briggs family, again, developed the coding and the system to really bring that to life. So the difference between, I guess, the official MBTI and perhaps some other quizzes out there or free assessments, really it comes down to the scientific rigor in which they've been put together. So the MBTI meets all the requirements of a psychological assessment that have been kind of those standards that have been put out by different psychological bodies and associations around the world. Mm-hmm. So it does have that rigor behind it. So what that means is that at the end of the day, when you obtain your result, and if it tells you that you're an extrovert, or if it tells you that you're an introvert, or one of the other preferences as well, you can have a lot of confidence in that result being accurate for you. Mm-hmm. And the reason that's important is because while it's fun to take a quiz and to kind of share results, at the end of the day, a lot of people will want to make some important life decisions based upon these results. So we need to make sure that they're meaningful and they're accurate.
Right.
But yes, there are some other models which will look very similar to the MBTI. They might have different labels as well, but they are quite distinct from the official Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Right. And actually, I found on 16personalities.com, they actually did write that they're not MBTI, although mm-hmm. that part of the website is not translated into Chinese. So it's only English, and you sort of have to dig through it to find it. When you talked about making important decisions in life, it's very interesting because since I've started talking about MBTI, I've received invitations from banks, from makeup companies to mm-hmm. sort of develop my own idea of which type should invest in what, or what type would prefer what type of makeup, which I thought was very interesting. I have turned all of these down because that's not how you use MBTI. But I just think it's very interesting how people associate this with other things in life. Glad you cleared that up. The next thing I think has more weight on me because some of it did come from the psychology community in Taiwan. So the claim is MBTI is pseudoscience, and that psychologists with professional training do not recognize it as a valid tool.
No, both of those points aren't accurate. And I can't speak for all psychologists, but certainly in terms of being pseudoscience, no. The MBTI, it is a psychometric assessment that meets the rigorous standards that are put forward by psychologists, by psychology associations in terms of what's required to be met for a psychological assessment to be kind of established. So it's very reliable, it's very valid. We know that it measures what it's meant to be measured. And again, it's recognized by psychological bodies around the world. Mm-hmm. We qualify many psychologists through our certification program to use the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Where there can be some distinction sometimes is that it comes down more to just the construction of the tool and the nature of the tool. So a lot of psychologists will tend to have a greater emphasis in their training and in their practice to use more trait-based personality tools. This is where we're measuring someone along a continuum to see whether they're high or low compared to a normative group. Mm-hmm. The Myers-Briggs has been constructed differently. It's not a trait-based tool. The trait-based tools we use more for selection. They're more of evaluative. The Myers-Briggs is constructed in a different way, and it's really designed for a different purpose, which is really for development. So it's not looking to compare people. It's not looking to measure how much of a competency you have or how much of a trait that you have. It's really just trying to kind of point to what are some of the more individual preferences that we have, what's more true to our natural nature.
Right. So I think it's very important for people to hear that and understand it's not measuring, right? It's not about the measurement. It's typology, right? So I think a lot of people misunderstand that aspect of this tool. And also, I think it's important to understand the foundation of MBTI, what it's meant to do, because I think people think MBTI is so popular, it's supposed to solve all problems, right? To get to know every aspect of myself. And that's not necessarily true. I've had people ask me, what type should I date? Which is just mind-boggling. And, obviously I try to debunk that myth, but I'm not sure it's taking right now. And I think maybe it's just an easier way for young people to communicate with each other as well.
Yeah, and look, just a point I'd make around that is certainly we don't use the MBTI in any selection capacity. So we don't use it to recruit people to an organization for a particular role. We don't use it in dating. We don't use it to select the kind of people who we might want to date. But it does have value from a relationships point of view, just in terms of us learning more about ourselves, who we are, our natural strengths, the things that we like, but our blind spots as well, the things that might cause conflict, that cause, some tension in us at times, things that might bug us about another person at certain times. So the MBTI can be really useful as a way to help couples learn more about each other. So it is used in counseling, it's used in relationships, but we certainly wouldn't say that, I'm this type, so I need to select someone who is of a certain type because they would be the most ideal match. Again, we're all wonderfully unique people, different backgrounds, different experiences, different interests. The MBTI doesn't capture everything. It just is capturing really 4 aspects of our personality, which are very relevant to relationships outside of work, but also kind of our relationships inside the workplace as well.
Absolutely. So navigating relationships, whether work or personal, but not for selection whatsoever.
No. That's right.
Okay. The 4th question is that you don't have to take the official assessment to know your MBTI, as long as you have someone who is MBTI certified. If you have a certified practitioner with you who can teach you, then you do not need the official assessment.
No. So that's certainly not the recommended approach. So we take practitioners through a very rigorous certification program to learn all about the MBTI, understand how to apply it with individuals, how to apply it with groups. But there's also a recommended process for helping someone to understand their MBTI type. And first of all, it's not just really a case of taking the assessment to find out your result, and it's certainly not just chatting to a practitioner to find out your result. The recommended process is much more interactive. So what we want people to do is that they take the assessment and they'll then go through a self-assessment process guided by the practitioner or through an online platform, and then to finally kind of work through a process of determining their own best fit type. But in terms of the assessment itself, it's very predictive of someone's final type, their actual type. The range could be sort of 70 to 80% of the time. It will predict someone's type. The person's mindset can have a lot to do with that in terms of how they take the assessment, but the MBTI assessment is a very good predictor of someone's final type. Like for me, I've been doing this for years. I wouldn't just, if someone wanted to find out their personality type from me, I don't know them well enough, and they may not necessarily know themselves well enough. So the idea of going through the assessment, having this objective data point to consider, to talk about, and to explore, then that, working through the assessment with the practitioner is really the ultimate way for someone to really determine their best fit Myers-Briggs type.
Right. Thank you. And I think that's so important. And I think you have organizational psychology background as well. And so have I. Right. So I think we understand that you co-create relationship dynamics. So let's say if I'm very extroverted, so you might appear more introverted to me, but that doesn't necessarily make you an introverted preference person. So I do think that having the assessment, which is way more objective, as a reference point.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Look, in terms of the practitioner, as trained as they're going to be, they won't know as much about the individual. They'll have their own biases, their own kind of reference points. The current version of the assessment, which was released in 2018, it's continually revised, refreshed. The scoring is updated, and it's been developed based upon a global sample of around 17,000 people. So there's a lot of research that's gone into the current version of the MBTI assessment. So you can have a lot of confidence that, and what it shows us is that it does a good job around the world of trying to help people understand their type. So it is just a really great objective data point to be using to help people find out their MBTI type.
Right. And I think that 70 and 80% has been mentioned, right? I want everyone to understand for a personality assessment, any type of assessment that has 70 to 80% reliability and validity is very high in comparison to other tools and other assessments. So statistically speaking, I mean, unless you're a psychic of sort, it's not going to be 100%.
The standards that we look for in psychology, really for reliability, to make sure that when I take the assessment, I get reliable, consistent results over time. It's normally about 0.7 or 70%. But the MBTI, the current reliabilities are up really in most cases above 80%. So it really has extremely high reliability. It really is a well-constructed assessment.
Right. And that's why I continue to tell people, even though you're really looking at the 4 dimensions, right? The 4 dichotomies, that's why we need at least 93 questions or 144 questions, because if you really just ask 4 questions, there's no way to check that reliability. So there is a reason that the assessment is designed in such a way. So that's why it's very important that we use the official assessment. One thing that just came to mind, I'd like to add, there are a lot of people who put their MBTI type on their resumes now. When I recruit, I specifically ask them not to, because even though I am a certified practitioner, I'm not really completely sure I am bias free, that I might have certain assumptions or unconscious bias towards a type or a preference that I'm not even consciously aware of. So I just wanted to add that if it's not necessary, don't put it on your resume, because you don't know what people think of that type. Maybe there are a lot of people who are really into, I don't know, the commander, and others like, no, I hate the commander type, right?
Again, it may not necessarily be the person's accurate type as well. So, depending upon how they've gone to find out their type, if they've just spoken to someone, they've been told that, I think that you're these particular letters, or if you've taken a quiz and it's given you a certain result. So, I guess that there can be some questions as to whether or not they've taken the official assessment, really do understand their correct best fit type. But you're absolutely right. There could be some biases that people could have around type, or perceptions they have around type. And type is not predictive of our competence, of our skills. As an example, if you were working in a customer service role, you might think, okay, being more extroverted, or in the sales role, being more extroverted may mean that you'll be a great salesperson. That's not true. When we look at occupational samples, all types are represented. There are extroverts in sales or customer service. There's introverts in sales and customer service. So all types can be attracted to all roles. And in terms of their skills in selling, or their skills in working with people, that's something that the MBTI won't measure. So again, I think it's probably good to not use it in a way where it could have any sort of influence over a selection decision, and instead to then focus more on using it. Once that decision's been made, look to use it more in terms of development. So, helping people with, onboarding, with integration, with working with their team, understanding kind of their strengths, their blind spots, as it might be, in the role that they find themselves in.
Right. Thank you so much. That is so important, I think, for people to hear again and again. So last myth is MBTI changes all the time. It depends on my age, or my mood, or the people I'm with, or maybe I had a bad experience, and after that, my MBTI completely changed. The most common one that I've heard is that I used to be so F-preferenced, but ever since I got my heart broken, now I'm a full-on T, right? That comes up quite a bit. So can you tell people who thinks that their MBTI changes all the time? What would you tell them?
The quick answer is no. MBTI doesn't technically change all the time. So according to the model is saying that our personality preferences are innate, and they are stable over time. Now, that being said, we all do change as people, absolutely. So we all change, we grow, we develop. But really what we're starting to see are changes in behavior, and some preferred behaviors as well. The personality will do a good job of predicting our kind of more stable, more consistent behaviors that we're going to use most of the time. But there can be certain life situations, life forces, whether it's culture, whether it's relationships, family environments, work and training, that might see us develop other behaviors that are more suitable or more comfortable for us at different times.
Right.
So people grow and develop, but it's really just different behavioral choices becoming used more and more frequently. But what's not happening is my innate personality isn't changing. My preferences do remain quite stable. The analogy that we use, which you'd be very familiar with, is the idea of hand preference. So if I'm born right-handed, I'll always be a right-handed person. I might develop skills in using my left hand for certain activities, but it doesn't mean that I'll suddenly become a left-handed person. I'll always be born and always be a more innate right-hand dominant person. So these fundamental preferences we have, they don't really shift. We can develop skills and comfort in using the opposite of our preferences, but our innate preferences, they don't really shift.
Right. And I'll just add to that with my personal experience. After a certain age, I realized I may have to develop my empathy, right? So that's something that I am being very intentional about. Checking in with others, checking with myself. How do I feel about this? How do others feel about it? But if I were under pressure, that goes out the window. Like if I'm under time pressure or whatnot, I use my default mode. It's back to, being very efficient, like get things done. So I definitely see that in myself and I'm more aware of that. So the last question is actually from me, because as a certified practitioner, I understand this theory, but there are a lot of data from the neuroscience community now showing that our neuroplasticity actually continues as we age. So let's say if I were very, very intentional in changing my preference, like I tie my preferred hand up for 10 years and I only use my non-preferred hand. Once I release my right hand, would I become more ambidextrous? Or is my innate preference still there? Is there a way for me to override that neural pathway?
Yes, it borrows, I guess, from the last thing we were talking about in terms of preferences not really changing over time. So yes, we all do change as people. Our brains, in terms of neuroplasticity, yes, we can form new pathways and develop new behaviors, new ways of kind of operating that become quite comfortable. But these are, again, more learned behaviors that become comfortable over time. Still, I think more innately and kind of underlying that is that with innate personality preferences wouldn't really change. So in that example of where if you tied up one of your hands, yes, you might develop some really strong skills in using your non-preferred hand, but when given the freedom to choose, you still have your dominant preference. So the dominant preferences wouldn't really change, but it might be that you do develop some skills and very comfortable skills in using some behaviors that look quite different to your underlying preference.
Right. I think you made a great point. It's given the freedom to choose, right? Because in my analogy, I had tied my dominant hand, but once I have the freedom to choose, I might still use my preferred hand. Thank you.
Yeah.
I do hope there is more official presence. International Markets Officer. It had personally changed my life when I was faced with midlife crisis. So I do hope more and more people understand this assessment and also how to use it.
Completely agree. And thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing in Taiwan and in the region.
Thank you. And hopefully you might come visit.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
好，那以上就是我们的采访，所以谢谢大家。Thank you all for joining us. 那大家下次见，拜拜。